The signal, the void between stars, was never truly silent. Commander Vrelix of the assembled Concordat had learned this truth over 40 cycles of service aboard the Harmony's Herald. Space hummed with background radiation, whispered with cosmic whines, and occasionally screamed with the death cries of collapsing stars. But what his sensors detected now was something different entirely, something impossible. "Commander, the signal persists." His communications officer, a young Tevri named Sewell, flexed her sensory tendrils nervously. "It's growing stronger. Whatever's broadcasting it is moving toward the Kepler 442 system." Vrelig studied the cascading data on his command interface. The signal was unlike anything in the Concordat's extensive archives, not the simple mathematical patterns of a newly spacefaring species, nor the complex harmonics of an established civilization. This was something that made his scales itch with unease. It was confident. "Analysis?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. A commander's composure was everything when facing the unknown. Sewell's colors shifted to uncertain yellow. "The encryption is—" "There is no encryption, Commander. It's broadcasting openly on every conceivable frequency. Power output suggests a vessel at least 3 times our mass. The pattern repeats every 4.7 seconds, but I cannot decode the meaning." "Because you're thinking too hard about it," said Science Officer Crane from his station. The insectoid Zeren clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "This isn't a greeting, it's a declaration. The signal is saying, 'I am here, I am powerful, notice me.'" Vrelix felt his temperature drop slightly, an involuntary fear response his species had never fully evolved past. In 12,000 years of recorded galactic history, there had been 3 dominant patterns of first contact. Species either hid, hoping to remain unnoticed until they understood the larger universe. They broadcast simple greetings, eager but cautious. Or they went silent entirely, their civilizations having destroyed themselves before reaching the stars. Never had a species announced itself like this, as if challenging the galaxy itself. "Helm, adjust course. Bring us to a parallel vector, but maintain distance. I want 5 light minutes between us and that signal." Vrelix paused, running through protocols he'd never expected to use. "And activate the combat shields." "Commander?" Sewell's colors flickered to surprised orange. "Precautionary," Vrelix said. Though his instincts were screaming warnings his conscious mind hadn't fully processed yet. "We follow the Concordat's first directive. Understand before engaging, but we do so carefully." The Harmony's Herald adjusted its trajectory, ion drives humming as it matched velocity with the mysterious vessel. As they drew closer to Kepler 442, Vrelix studied what little his sensors could tell him about their target. The ship was massive, easily a capital-class vessel by Concordat standards. Its hull reflected sensor scans in ways that suggested advanced metamaterials, possibly adaptive armor. Energy signatures indicated a power core generating output levels that would require either breakthrough fusion technology or something more exotic. Most disturbing of all were the hard points studded across its hull, unmistakable weapon mounts, though nothing was currently active. This was no exploration vessel. This was a warship pretending to be a diplomat. Crane cross-referenced that configuration with known architectural patterns, Vrelix ordered. The Zeren worked for several minutes, his compound eyes reflecting the glow of multiple displays. When he finally looked up, his colors had shifted to confused green. "Nothing matches, Commander. The design philosophy is completely foreign. It's not built for efficiency like Concordat vessels, nor for redundancy like Cathran ships. It's built for modularity, adaptability. Every system appears designed to be replaced or upgraded rapidly. A civilization that expects to evolve their technology mid-deployment," Vrelin murmured. "Interesting. Commander, we're within communication range." Sewell's tendrils quivered with anticipation. "Shall I transmit the Concordat's standard greeting?" Vrelix considered this carefully. The standard greeting was a carefully crafted mathematical proof, followed by pictographic representations of peaceful intent. It had worked for 47 first contact scenarios over the past millennium, but something about this situation felt different. Still, protocol existed for a reason. Transmit, he said, all frequencies, and record everything. Sewell began the transmission, her equipment sending out the carefully structured sequence that had become the Concordate's calling card. Frelix watched the timer, expecting the usual delay. Most species took hours, sometimes days, to decode the greeting and formulate a response. Some never responded at all, too frightened by the confirmation they weren't alone in the universe. The timer reached 37 seconds. Then every display on the bridge lit up simultaneously. Incoming transmission. Sewell shrieked, her colors flashing alarm red. Direct response, full spectrum, targeting our specific location. On screen, Frelix commanded, his voice cutting through the sudden chaos. The view screen flickered, then cleared to show what appeared to be another command bridge. But where the Harmony's herald was designed with organic curves and soft lighting optimized for multiple species' comfort, this bridge was angular, efficient, almost aggressive in its functionality. Screens displayed data in a rapid-fire cascade that made Frelix's head hurt trying to follow. And standing at the center of it all was a creature unlike any he'd seen. Bipedal. Bilateral symmetry. Predatory eyes facing forward. Smooth skin covering what were clearly endoskeletal structures. The being wore a dark uniform that bore markings indicating rank, a universal enough concept that Frelix recognized it immediately. The creature spoke, and the translation matrix struggled for a moment before settling on a rendering that sent ice through Frelix's veins. This is the Terran Command Vessel Resolute. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy. We have received and decoded your transmission. The creature's face remained neutral, but something in her eyes suggested she was evaluating them as much as they were evaluating her. Identify yourself and state your intentions in this system. The bridge fell absolutely silent. Frelix's mind raced through the impossible arithmetic. 37 seconds. They had received the Concordate's greeting, decoded it, formulated a response, and transmitted it back in 37 seconds. The fastest previous response time in recorded history had been 14 hours by the Xelnoth, a species renowned for their computational abilities. But more than the speed, it was the tone. This Captain Chen hadn't responded with fear or wonder or even curiosity. She had responded with a demand. "Commander," Sewell whispered, her colors cycling through confused patterns. "What do we do?" Frelix forced his scales to settle, projecting a calm he didn't feel. He was a commander of the assembled Concordate, a veteran of 40 cycles, and he would not be rattled by one unusual first contact, no matter how unprecedented. "Open channel," he said quietly. "Let's introduce ourselves properly." He stepped forward, ensuring the visual pickup would show his formal posture of peaceful intent, forearms crossed, scales dimmed to non-threatening blue. When he spoke, he let the translation matrix do its work, hoping it could convey the mixture of diplomacy and caution he felt. "Captain Chen of Earth, I am Commander Frelix of the assembled Concordate vessel Harmony's Herald. We are explorers and ambassadors of a coalition of 47 species across 14 solar systems. We detected your vessel's transmission and responded according to our protocols for first contact." He paused, studying the human's face for any reaction. She remained perfectly still, only her eyes moving slightly as if reading something beyond the visual pickup's frame. "We come in peace," Frelix continued, invoking the ancient formula. "And we extend an invitation to join the greater galactic community in Commander Frelix." Captain Chen's voice cut through his prepared speech with the precision of a laser cutter. "Before we proceed further, I need to understand something. When you say you detected our transmission, are you referring to the general navigation beacon of the Resolute, or did you detect something else?" The question was so unexpected that Frelix hesitated. "Your navigation beacon? That powerful signal broadcasting on all frequencies is merely for navigation?" Something shifted in Captain Chen's expression. It might have been amusement. "The Resolute is currently operating under standard protocols for deep space exploration. Our primary transmitter is actually powered down for maintenance. What you detected is our automated positioning system, yes." Frelix felt the temperature of his blood drop another degree. If that powerful complex signal was merely an automated system. I see, he said carefully. Then perhaps we should begin with a more fundamental question. How long has your species been spacefaring? Captain Chen tilted her head slightly, a gesture Vrelix couldn't interpret. The United Earth Navy launched its first interstellar vessel 73 years ago. The Resolute herself is only 12 years old, though she's received 4 major retrofit cycles in that time. The bridge of the Harmony's herald erupted in shocked murmurs. 73 years. The Concordat had catalogued over 300 spacefaring species in their archives, and the fastest any had progressed from first interstellar flight to capital ship deployment was 240 years. These humans had done it in less than a third of that time. That is remarkable, Vrelix managed. His mind was already racing ahead, calculating implications. A species that advanced this quickly would either burn out spectacularly or become a dominant force. Given that they were still here, still building warships, still exploring. Captain Chen, I believe we have much to discuss. Would you be willing to continue this dialogue? Perhaps even arrange a meeting between our crews. The human's expression shifted again, and this time Vrelix was certain it was amusement. Commander, I would be very interested in that. But I think there's something else you should know first. She gestured, and the view screen split to show a wider tactical display. Vrelix stared at it for 3 full seconds before the implications hit him. The Resolute wasn't alone. 4 other vessels, each nearly as large, were arranged in a loose formation around the system's outer planets. They had been there all along, running silent, invisible to the Harmony's herald sensors until Captain Chen had chosen to reveal them. The Resolute is the command vessel of Task Force 7, Captain Chen said calmly. We've been surveying this system for potential colonization for the past 6 months. Your arrival is the first contact we've made with another spacefaring species in this sector. She paused, and when she spoke again, there was something harder in her voice, something that reminded Vrelix of why predators evolved forward-facing eyes. So let me ask you a question in return, Commander. You said you come in peace. That's good, so do we. But tell me, in your 47-species coalition, how many of them achieved interstellar flight in less than a century, and how many of those were invited to join your Concordat? Versus how many were absorbed? The silence that followed was profound. Vrelix realized, with the crystalline clarity of perfect hindsight, that humanity's reputation in the galaxy was about to become very interesting indeed. Perhaps, he said slowly, we should all proceed with this conversation very carefully. Captain Chen smiled. It was not an entirely reassuring expression. Commander, she said, I think that's the smartest thing either of us has said today. The meeting. The observation deck of the Resolute had been designed with first contact in mind, though the human engineers who built it had imagined something different than this. Commander Vrelix stood near the viewport, his scales unconsciously shifting through muted colors as he processed everything he'd learned in the past 18 hours. Behind him, his security detail, 2 Cathron warriors and a Tevri sensor specialist, maintained careful watch. Across the room, Captain Chen's own guards mirrored their positions with professional courtesy. The humans had insisted on hosting the first face-to-face meeting aboard the Resolute. Vrelix had agreed, partly because protocol suggested the diplomatically sound choice, but mostly because he wanted to see a human vessel from the inside. What he'd seen had been disturbing. The shuttle bay alone could have housed his entire ship. The corridors were wide enough for heavy equipment to move freely, with reinforced bulkheads every 50 meters that could seal in microseconds. He'd counted no fewer than 17 different automated defense systems during the walk from the airlock, all currently passive but clearly ready to activate at a moment's notice. This wasn't an exploration vessel. This was a fortress that happened to move between stars. Commander, your people seem uncomfortable. Captain Chen approached with 2 steaming cups, offering one. Coffee, it's a human stimulant drink. The chemical analysis has been provided to your medical officer. It's safe for Tevri physiology, though I can't speak for your species. Vrelix accepted the cup carefully, noting how Chen's movements were economical, precise. She wasted no energy, made no unnecessary gestures. It reminded him of how apex predators moved, confident in their ability to react to any threat. Thank you, Captain. And yes, this ship is impressive, larger than our projections suggested. Chen's lips quirked upward. He was learning to recognize this as a human smile, though the baring of teeth still triggered his prey species instincts. The Resolute is actually middle-sized by UEN standards. Our dreadnoughts are 3 times her mass. Vrelic's scales flickered involuntary alarm yellow before he could control them. Chen noticed but said nothing, which somehow made it worse. Captain, perhaps we should address the obvious concern. Vrelic set down the untasted coffee. In the past day, I have learned that humanity has expanded to 17 solar systems, maintains a fleet of over 300 capital ships, and has apparently been preparing for large-scale conflict since achieving interstellar flight. You must understand how this appears to the Concordat. Like we're warmongers, Chen said flatly. Aggressive, dangerous, unpredictable. She moved to the viewport, looking out at the distant star. Commander, let me tell you a story about Earth. Vrelic waited. In his experience, stories often revealed more truth than data. 300 years ago, we nearly destroyed ourselves, Chen began. Climate collapse, nuclear weapons, biological warfare, resource depletion, you name it, we did it. We came within one decision, one moment, one person's choice of rendering our homeworld uninhabitable. She turned to face him, and Vrelic saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It wasn't anger or aggression. It was memory. Old pain, carefully controlled. We survived by the narrowest margin imaginable. And when we pulled back from that brink, when we finally unified and looked up at the stars, we asked ourselves one question. What if it happens again? What if we find something out here we can't handle? What if the galaxy isn't friendly? So you built warships, Vrelic said quietly. So we built warships, Chen confirmed. And colonies with self-sustaining ecosystems. And seed vaults on 100 different worlds. And data archives scattered across 20 light years. We built redundancy, Commander. We built survival. She gestured toward the viewport where the other vessels of Task Force 7 were visible as distant points of light. Every ship in the UEN has dual purpose. The Resolute is a warship, yes. She's also a mobile hospital, a research station, a manufacturing facility, and a potential colony seed if necessary. We don't build single-purpose vessels because we learned the hard way that the universe doesn't care about your plans. Vrelic processed this, his analytical mind working through the implications. You're preparing for extinction. We're preparing to never face extinction again, Chen corrected. There's a difference. We're not paranoid, Commander. We're experienced. Before Vrelic could respond, his communicator chimed. Sewell's voice came through, tension clear even through the translator. Commander, you need to see this. We've completed our analysis of the human database they shared. Chen nodded permission and Vrelic activated his portable display. The data that appeared made him freeze. This can't be accurate, he whispered. What is it? Chen asked, moving closer. Vrelic looked up at her, reassessing everything he thought he understood. Your technological progression. Captain, do you realize that you've achieved in 70 years what takes most species 500? Faster than light communication, metamaterial armor, fusion power, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence. You've made breakthrough advances in every major field simultaneously. We had motivation, Chen said simply. No species has this kind of motivation. Vrelic's scales flashed agitated red despite his efforts to control them. The pattern is impossible. Even accounting for your species' aggression and risk tolerance, the mathematics don't work. You should have had at least a dozen major setbacks, catastrophic failures that delayed progress for decades, but your records show almost none. How? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. We had setbacks, Commander. We just handled them differently than you might expect. Explain. Chen walked to a control panel and pulled up a holographic display. It showed Earth's moon, pockmarked in gray. Do you know what this crater is called? She highlighted a feature on the lunar surface. No. The Memorial Crater. On July 17, 2184, our first fusion test facility on the moon experienced a catastrophic failure. The explosion killed 2,847 people and set our fusion program back by what should have been a decade. Vrelic's scales shifted to sympathetic blue. The loss of life was tragic by any measure. 8 months later, Chen continued, we had a new facility operational. The breakthrough that enabled practical fusion power came 3 months after that. Do you know why? Desperation? Memory, Chen said quietly. We named every subsequent fusion reactor after someone who died in that explosion. Every engineer who works on fusion power learns their names, their stories, their families. We don't forget our failures, Commander. We build on top of them. She changed the display, showing a complex timeline of human technological development. Vrela could see the pattern now. Each major breakthrough was marked with memorial tags. Disasters that had killed hundreds, sometimes thousands, transformed into the foundations for the next leap forward. You weaponize your grief, he said, the realization crystallizing. We honor our sacrifices, Chen corrected firmly. Every human knows that someone died to give us the stars. We don't take that lightly and we don't waste it. A soft chime interrupted them. Chen checked her communicator and smiled. That expression was becoming less unsettling the more Vrela saw it. Commander, my science team has prepared a presentation about Earth and human culture. I thought you might appreciate a more comprehensive introduction to who we are. Would you join me in the briefing room? Vrela glanced at his security team. The Cathron warriors nodded slightly. They detected no threats. I would be honored. The briefing room was surprisingly comfortable, designed with adjustable seating that accommodated multiple body types. Vrela settled into a configuration that supported his physiology, while the human science team filed in. The lead scientist was an older human male with graying hair and bright, curious eyes. Commander Vrela, I'm Dr. James Park, Xenosociology Division. We've prepared an overview of human civilization, but I thought we might start with a question. What do you already know about Earth? Vrela considered this. Very little, I'm afraid. Your species wasn't in our database before yesterday. We know you're carbon-based, oxygen-breathing, evolved from predatory primates on a world you call Earth. Beyond that, he gestured uncertainty. Dr. Park nodded enthusiastically. Then let me paint you a picture. The room's lights dimmed and a holographic display activated, showing a blue-green world spinning slowly. Vrela felt his breath catch. It was beautiful, vibrant in a way that made his homeworld seem pale by comparison. Earth is a Class M world by our classification. Liquid water, stable atmosphere, rich biodiversity. What makes it unusual is the sheer variety of environments. We have frozen tundras and scorching deserts, deep oceans and high mountains, tropical jungles and temperate forests, all on one world. The display zoomed in, showing different regions in rapid succession. Vrela saw ecosystems so varied they could have been different planets. Humans evolved to be adaptable, Dr. Park continued. We're not the strongest species on Earth, nor the fastest nor the toughest. But we can survive almost anywhere. We've lived in every major climate zone on our planet for thousands of years. This is unusual? Vrela asked. Extremely, Dr. Park said. Most spacefaring species we've studied through your database evolved in relatively uniform environments. They specialize. Humans generalize. It's our evolutionary advantage. The display changed to show human populations spreading across Earth, then to the Moon, Mars, Europa, and eventually other star systems. The speed of expansion was breathtaking. But adaptability alone doesn't explain your advancement rate, Vrela observed. No, Dr. Park agreed. For that, you need to understand human culture. Commander, how many distinct cultures does your species have? Vrela thought. My people, the Tevri, have 3 major cultural groups based on our 3 continental populations. Some minor variations exist, but we're largely unified. Earth has over 12,000 distinct cultures, Dr. Park said quietly. The number hit Vrela like a physical blow. Impossible. No species could unify with that much diversity. We almost didn't, Captain Chen interjected. It took centuries and came closer to failure than success. But when we finally did unify, we kept the diversity. We learned that different perspectives drive innovation. Dr. Park brought up a new display, a web of interconnected nodes, each labeled with unfamiliar terms. This is a map of current human academic fields. We have 847 recognized scientific disciplines, each with multiple subspecializations. A human scientist might spend their entire life studying one tiny aspect of one field, and there are millions of us doing exactly that simultaneously. You parallelize knowledge acquisition, Vrela said slowly, understanding dawning. Instead of moving through discovery sequentially, you pursue thousands of research paths at once. Exactly. Dr. Park's enthusiasm was infectious. It's chaotic, inefficient in many ways, and leads to a lot of dead ends. But it also means breakthroughs can come from unexpected directions. The technology that enabled our FTL communication came from a team studying Earth's dolphins of all things. They weren't even looking for communications technology. They were trying to understand cetacean language. Vrelix felt his worldview shifting. The Concordate's approach to advancement was methodical, careful, sequential. They mastered one technology before moving to the next, building a stable foundation. It took longer, but it was safe. Humanity had apparently decided to build the entire structure at once and hope it didn't collapse. The terrifying thing was that it seemed to be working. "Commander," Captain Chen said, "I think it's time I showed you something that will help you understand why we are the way we are." "Dr. Park, bring up the archive." The holographic display shifted again, and Vrelix found himself looking at what appeared to be a massive digital library. The scale was staggering, trillions of files organized in complex hierarchies. "This is the Human Cultural Archive," Chen explained. "Every ship in the UN carries a complete copy. It contains every book written in every human language, every piece of music composed, every film made, every scientific paper published, every work of art created, the history of every culture, the records of every civilization that rose and fell on Earth." She paused, and her voice took on a weight that made Vrelix's scales prickle. "And it contains the names of every human who died in our wars, our famines, our disasters. All 6 billion people who perished during the collapse. Every single one." The display zoomed to show individual files, each containing a life story, a history, a memory preserved in digital amber. "We carry our dead with us," Chen said softly. "All of them. We remember what we were, what we survived, what we lost, and we make damn sure we never forget why we're out here." Vrelix stared at the archive, doing the mathematics. The computational power required to store and maintain this database multiplied across hundreds of ships. "This is why you build such large vessels," he realized. "The processing power, the storage capacity, it's not just for operations. You're carrying your entire civilization's memory with you. Every time a human ship leaves Earth, it takes Earth with it," Dr. Park said. "If our homeworld were to somehow be destroyed tomorrow, humanity would continue. Our culture, our knowledge, our history, all preserved." "You really are preparing for extinction," Vrelix whispered. "We're preparing to make extinction impossible," Chen corrected. "There's a difference." A thought occurred to Vrelix, cold and clear. "Captain, in the Concordate we have protocols for integrating new species. There are conditions, requirements, a gradual process of cultural exchange and alignment. It typically takes a century or more." "And you're wondering if humanity would accept those terms," Chen finished. "Yes." Captain Chen looked at Dr. Park, then back to Vrelix. Her expression was unreadable. "Commander, I think it's time we discussed what the Concordate really is. Because from what we've learned of your coalition in the past day, I have some concerns about your definition of integration." She pulled up a new display. Vrelix recognized it as his own ship's database, the historical records of Concordate expansion. "You said you're a coalition of 47 species across 14 systems," Chen said. "But when we cross-referenced your records with our astronomical surveys, we found something interesting. Those 14 systems? They're all within 30 light-years of each other. Very convenient for a naturally formed coalition." Vrelix felt something cold forming in his stomach. "And when we looked at the integration dates of your member species, we noticed a pattern. The species that joined early, when the Concordate was smaller, maintained their cultural identity. They have representation, autonomy, real power. But the species that joined later, the ones who encountered the Concordate after it became dominant?" Chen's eyes were hard now. "They're called member species, but their integration records read more like annexations. Gradual cultural assimilation, economic dependency, military integration. Always peaceful, always diplomatic, always by mutual agreement." She leaned forward. "Always inevitable." The silence stretched. Vrelix wanted to defend the Concordate, to explain the nuances, the benefits, the prosperity that came with membership. But looking at the data through Chen's eyes, he saw what she saw. An empire, not built with weapons but with time and inevitability. "The species that refuse integration," Vrelix said quietly. "What happened to them?" "That's what we'd like to know," Chen said. "Because according to your astronomical surveys, you've encountered 63 spacefaring species in your expansion zone. But only 47 are in the Concordate. So where are the other 16? Vrelix closed his eyes. He knew the answer. Everyone in the Concordate knew, though they rarely spoke of it. The species that refused integration, the ones who were deemed too aggressive, too dangerous, too incompatible, they were left alone, yes, isolated by mutual agreement, isolated until they encountered the universe alone, until they made enemies they couldn't handle, until they came back to the Concordat, desperate, willing to accept any terms. It wasn't genocide. It wasn't even conquest. It was just patience. I see, Chen said, reading his expression. So here's the situation, Commander. Humanity is not going to become your 48th member species. We're not going to accept a century-long integration process that ends with us becoming junior partners in your empire. She stood, and Vrelix was reminded again that humans were predators. But we are interested in peaceful coexistence. Trade, cultural exchange, mutual defense agreements, all of that is on the table. What's not on the table is subordination. The Concordat Council will never accept an equal partnership with a species so young, Vrelix said. It was a simple truth devoid of malice. The precedent would be catastrophic. Other species would demand the same treatment. Then you have a problem, Chen said. Because we're not going away and we're not stopping our expansion. We have 17 systems now. In 20 years, we'll have 50. In 50 years, 100. We will continue to grow because that's what we do. That's what kept us alive on Earth, and it's what will keep us alive out here. She moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars. You can work with us or you can try to contain us. But I'll warn you now, Commander, we've gotten very good at breaking containment. Vrelix stood slowly, his mind racing through scenarios, probabilities, outcomes. Everything he'd learned about humanity in the past day suggested they weren't bluffing. They really would expand regardless of Concordat approval, and if the Concordat tried to stop them, he thought about those 5 warships running silent, invisible until they chose to be seen. Thought about the technological advancement rate that shouldn't be possible. Thought about a species that turned grief into weapons and disasters into determination. What do you propose? He asked. Captain Chen turned, and her smile was genuine this time. A new kind of first contact. Not integration, not alliance. Partnership. The Concordat and humanity working together as equals. You teach us what you've learned in 12,000 years of civilization. We show you what 70 years of desperate innovation looks like. And if the Council refuses, then we proceed alone, Chen said simply. We'll respect Concordat space, maintain peaceful relations, and continue our expansion in unclaimed regions. Eventually, one of 2 things happens. Either we prove we can coexist peacefully and the Council changes its mind, or we become powerful enough that the question of integration becomes moot. Vrelix felt a strange emotion he couldn't quite name. It might have been respect. It might have been fear. It might have been both. I will relay your proposal to the Council, he said formally, though I cannot predict their response. Fair enough. Chen extended her hand, a human gesture of agreement he'd learned from the cultural database. Thank you for your honesty, Commander, and for giving us a chance to explain ourselves before making judgments. Vrelix clasped her hand carefully, noting the strength in her grip. Captain, one final question. If the Concordat chooses confrontation over cooperation, what then? Captain Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went very cold. Then you'll learn the same lesson Earth taught us 300 years ago. It's not the strongest species that survives, Commander. It's the most adaptable, and humanity has gotten very, very good at adapting. She released his hand and stepped back. Safe travels, Commander Vrelix. I hope the next time we meet it's as friends rather than adversaries. As Vrelix made his way back to the shuttle bay, escorted by human guards who moved with quiet efficiency, he found himself thinking about that statement. Friends or adversaries, as if there were no middle ground, no comfortable distance. Perhaps there wasn't. Perhaps humanity had learned that lesson too, somewhere in their violent history. The shuttle ride back to the Harmony's Herald was silent. His security team, typically chatty after successful meetings, seemed subdued. They'd all felt it, that sense of standing at a precipice, looking down at a future that could go in dramatically different directions. When Vrelix reached his command deck, Sul was waiting with the communications array ready. Commander, the Council is awaiting your report. They're eager to hear about the new species. Vrelix settled into his command chair, organizing his thoughts. How did you explain humanity to the Concordat? How did you describe a species that seemed determined to rewrite every rule of galactic civilization? Open channel, he said finally. Priority 1 encryption. And record everything. The Council is going to want to review this multiple times. As the connection established, Vrelix took one last look at the Resolute through his view screen. Massive, powerful, unapologetically present. A statement carved in metal and energy. We are here. We matter. Deal with us. The future, Vrelix realized, was going to be very interesting, and quite possibly terrifying. The Council's decision. The Concordat Council chamber was designed to inspire awe. Suspended in the void between 3 binary stars, the station rotated slowly, its crystalline structure catching and refracting light in ways that created perpetual rainbows across its surface. Inside, the Grand Assembly Hall could accommodate representatives from all 47 member species simultaneously, each in environments optimized for their biology. Commander Vrellis had been here twice before in his career. Both times had been for ceremonial occasions, the peaceful integration of new species into the Concordat family. He had never imagined he would stand here as the bearer of news that could reshape the Council's understanding of the galaxy itself. Commander. Vrellis of the Harmonies. Herald, announced the Council speaker, an ancient Zelnoth whose neural cluster glowed with barely contained curiosity. You have requested an emergency session to report on first contact with a previously unknown species. The Council recognizes you. Proceed. Vrelix stepped forward into the central speaking platform, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes, sensory organs, and consciousness fields focusing on him. Above, the holographic display activated, ready to show his evidence. Honored Council members, he began, keeping his voice steady. 11 days ago, my vessel detected an unknown signal near the Kepler 442 system. Following standard first contact protocols, we approached and successfully established communication with a species that calls itself humanity, from a world called Earth. He paused, letting the holographic display show Earth rotating in all its blue-green glory. A murmur rippled through the chamber. It was a beautiful world, the kind that typically produced peaceful agrarian civilizations. Initial analysis suggested this would be a standard integration scenario. A young species, perhaps 2 to 3 centuries into their spacefaring age, ready to be welcomed into the Concordat. Vrelix's scales shifted to troubled yellow. That analysis was incorrect. The display changed, showing the Resolute and her task force. The murmur grew louder. Humanity achieved interstellar flight 73 years ago, Vrelix continued, and the chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. He waited for the speaker to restore order before continuing. In that time, they have expanded to 17 solar systems, built a fleet of over 300 capital-class vessels, and achieved technological breakthroughs across every major scientific discipline. Impossible. The objection came from Counselor Thren, a Jiran military strategist. No species advances that quickly. The psychological adaptation alone would require centuries. They would have torn themselves apart. They nearly did, Vrelix said quietly. 300 years ago, humanity almost rendered their homeworld uninhabitable through warfare and environmental destruction. They survived by the narrowest margin. That experience changed them. He brought up the data files, the technological progression charts, the expansion timelines. I have verified all of this information through direct observation and data exchange. Humanity is real. They are advancing at an unprecedented rate, and they are, he paused, choosing his words carefully, not interested in traditional Concordat integration. The silence that followed was profound. Explain. The speaker's neural cluster pulsed with sharp intensity. Vrelix took a breath and told them everything. Captain Chen's proposal, the Human Cultural Archive, the ships running silent until they chose to reveal themselves, the pattern of Concordat expansion that humanity had identified and rejected. When he finished, the chamber exploded into chaos. Arrogance. Counselor Thren's mandibles clacked furiously. A species barely out of its cradle, and it dares to demand equal standing with civilizations thousands of years old? Not arrogance, pragmatism, countered Counselor Vess, a Tevri philosopher. They've analyzed our patterns and concluded that integration means eventual subordination. Are they wrong? The Concordat doesn't subordinate, we integrate, another voice shouted. Tell that to the Kven, someone else muttered, just loud enough to be heard. A few counselors shifted uncomfortably. The Kven integration 2 centuries ago was still a sensitive subject. The speaker's neural cluster flared brilliant white, commanding silence. Counselors, we will approach this with reason, not emotion. Commander Vrelix, you have had direct contact with these humans. In your professional assessment, what are the strategic implications if we refuse their proposal? Vrelix had been preparing for this question since he left the Resolute. Honored Speaker, I believe we face 3 possible scenarios. First, we accept their proposal for equal partnership. This would be unprecedented, but would establish humanity as an ally rather than a potential adversary. Unacceptable, Counselor Thren interjected. The precedent would destabilize the entire concordate structure. Perhaps, Vrelix acknowledged. Second scenario, we refuse their proposal but establish diplomatic relations, treating them as an independent power. This maintains our principles while avoiding conflict. And they continue expanding unchecked, Vess observed, eventually claiming systems we might have wanted. Which brings us to the third scenario, Vrelix said, his scales going dark with unease. We treat humanity as we've treated other resistant species. Diplomatic isolation, economic containment, waiting for them to either collapse under their own dysfunction or come to us on our terms. That has always worked before, Thren said confidently. Has it? The question came from an unexpected source, Counselor Marin, representative of the ancient Zelnoth. Her species had founded the Concordat 12,000 years ago, and her words carried enormous weight. Commander, you said humanity nearly destroyed themselves, yet they survived and unified. That suggests unusual psychological resilience. With respect, Counselor, I believe unusual is an understatement. Vrelix brought up the footage from his meeting with Captain Chen. Humanity doesn't just remember their near extinction, they've weaponized it. Every human in their navy knows the names of those who died so they could reach the stars. They carry their entire civilization's history with them on every ship. They don't fear extinction because they've already faced it once and won. He let that sink in before continuing. If we try to contain them, we'll be attempting to isolate a species that spent 3 centuries preparing for exactly that scenario. They've built redundancy into every system. Multiple colonies, scattered archives, self-sufficient outposts. They don't need us, counselors. They're designed to survive alone. Then we'll wait them out, Thren insisted. Eventually they'll encounter something they can't handle. A hostile species, a cosmic disaster, their own internal divisions. They'll come to appreciate what the Concordat offers. Or, Vess said quietly, they'll handle it themselves and grow stronger, and then we'll have a peer competitor instead of a potential member species. The debate raged for hours. Vrelix watched, occasionally providing additional details but mostly observing the Council's divisions. Roughly a third favored Thren's hardline approach, establish boundaries and wait for humanity to learn its place. Another third leaned toward Vess's pragmatism, engage diplomatically but carefully. The final third seemed genuinely uncertain. The deciding vote would likely come from the Zelnoth representatives, the founding species whose wisdom had guided the Concordat since its inception. Finally, Counselor Marin raised the appendage requesting the floor. The chamber fell silent immediately. I have reviewed all of Commander Vrelix's data, she said, her translation matrix rendering her thoughts into words that echoed through the chamber. And I have reached a conclusion that may surprise you all. This situation is not unprecedented. Every eye turned to her. The Zelnoth were the memory keepers of the Concordat. If Marin said something had precedent, it did. 12,000 years ago, when my species first achieved interstellar flight, we encountered another spacefaring civilization, the Vorka. They were older than us, more established, more numerous. Marin's neural cluster pulsed with ancient memory. They offered us integration, a gradual process of cultural exchange and alignment, a place in their great coalition. Vrelix's scales prickled. This story wasn't in any standard historical database. We refused, Marin continued. We told them we would forge our own path. They were offended. They tried isolation, containment, all the standard strategies. Do you know what happened? No one answered. We grew. We adapted. We expanded despite their efforts. And eventually we grew powerful enough that they could no longer dictate terms to us. Marin's cluster brightened with what might have been amusement. The Vorka coalition collapsed 7,000 years ago. Bureaucratic ossification, technological stagnation. Inability to adapt to changing circumstances. The Concordat rose from its ashes, built on the principle that we would not repeat their mistakes. She turned to address the full council. Yet here we are, confronting a young species that refuses subordination, and our instinct is to treat them exactly as the Vorka treated us. Have we learned nothing? The silence was deafening. Counselor Marin, Thren said carefully, with respect to your species' history, humanity is not the Xelnoth. They are aggressive, militaristic, dangerously ambitious. They are survivors, Marin interrupted. Just as we were. Just as every species in this chamber was at some point. They have simply survived more recently and more dramatically than most. She paused. Commander Vrelix, you spoke with their captain directly. What was your personal assessment of her character? Vrelix considered the question carefully. Honest, strategic, committed to her people's survival above all else. She was not needlessly aggressive, but she made it clear that humanity would not be easily influenced or controlled. If I'm honest, Counselor, she reminded me of the historical accounts of young Xelnoth leaders. Before you learned diplomacy. A ripple of surprise went through the Xelnoth delegation. Marin's cluster pulsed with what was definitely amusement now. Then my recommendation is this, Marin said. We accept humanity's proposal, not as supplicants requesting entry, but as equals offering partnership. We establish formal diplomatic relations, negotiate trade agreements, share technological knowledge on a reciprocal basis. We treat them as we would wish to have been treated 12,000 years ago. And if they use that knowledge against us, Thren demanded. Then we will deal with that problem when it arises, Marin said calmly. But I would rather face a humanity that views us as honorable partners than one that sees us as would-be conquerors. The first might become our greatest ally. The second will inevitably become our most dangerous enemy. She turned back to Vrele. Commander, can you contact the human vessel from here? Yes, Counselor. They provided communication protocols. Good. Because I believe we should invite Captain Chen to address this council directly. Let us hear from humanity itself what they envision for our future relationship. The debate that followed was intense, but Marin's words had shifted the chamber's mood. The proposal to invite Chen passed by a narrow margin, 24 votes in favor, 20 votes opposed, 3 abstentions. As Vrelix made his way to the communications center, he felt the weight of history pressing down on him. In the next few hours, the course of galactic civilization might be fundamentally altered. He just hoped everyone involved understood what they were risking. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the communications room of the Resolute, reviewing the message that had arrived 3 hours ago. An invitation to address the Concordat Council directly, to make humanity's case for equal partnership before the assembled representatives of 47 species. It was an opportunity. It was also a trap. They're testing us, said Commander Marcus Webb, her executive officer, seeing if we'll come when called. Seeing if we'll defer to their authority. Of course they are, Chen agreed. Just like we're testing them by accepting. Seeing if they'll actually listen, or if this is just theater before they make whatever decision they've already made. She pulled up the tactical display, studying the Concordat Council Station's position, deep in their territory, surrounded by their ships, their people, their power. Accepting this invitation meant bringing the Resolute into the heart of the Concordat. A show of either confidence or foolishness, depending on your perspective. Set course, she said.
Full task force.
If we're doing this, we're doing it properly, Webb nodded. And if it goes badly? Chen smiled. Then they'll learn something important about humanity. We don't make threats we're not prepared to back up. The arrival of the human task force sent ripples of alarm through the Concordat defense grid. 5 massive warships, emerging from FTL in perfect formation, their weapons powered down but ready. They held position at the edge of the defensive perimeter, close enough to matter, far enough to not be overtly threatening. Vrelix watched from the council station as the Resolute detached from the formation and approached alone, her shields up, but her weapons cold. A calculated display. We are strong enough to come here with our fleet, disciplined enough to approach alone, and confident enough to know the difference matters. Captain Chen's shuttle docked with the station 43 minutes later. The council had assembled in full formal session, all 47 species represented, all watching the view screens that showed the human approaching. She walked into the Grand Assembly Hall with 2 guards flanking her, both clearly military, both clearly capable, both clearly alert. Chen herself wore her uniform with the same unconscious confidence Vrelix had observed before. She looked around the chamber, taking in the assembled species with evident interest, showing neither intimidation nor arrogance. "Captain Chen of Earth," the speaker announced, "you have been invited to address this council regarding humanity's proposal for partnership. The floor is yours." Chen moved to the central platform, waiting until she had everyone's attention before she spoke. "Honored council members, thank you for this opportunity. I'll be direct, as I understand your time is valuable. Humanity seeks a relationship with the Concordat based on mutual respect, reciprocal benefit, and equal standing. We offer our knowledge, our capabilities, and our friendship. What we don't offer is subordination. Your species has existed in space for less than a century," Counselor Thren said sharply. "What knowledge could you possibly offer civilizations thousands of years old?" Chen's expression didn't change. "A perspective you've lost, Counselor. We remember what it's like to face extinction. We remember what it's like to have no one to rely on but ourselves. We remember that the universe doesn't care about your plans or your politics. It will kill you if you're not ready." She gestured, and a holographic display activated. With the Council's permission, Vrelix noted. She'd followed proper protocols. "This is Earth 300 years ago. Population 9 billion. Carbon dioxide levels 510 parts per million. Ocean acidification critical. Nuclear arsenals sufficient to sterilize the planet 12 times over. Estimated time to total collapse 14 years. The images that followed were haunting. Cities choked with pollution, oceans dead and gray, forests burning, refugees fleeing disasters that had no borders. "This is what failure looks like," Chen said quietly. "This is what happens when a species gets comfortable, assumes they have time, believes the universe will be gentle. We learned the hard way that it won't." The display changed, showing Earth in the present. Clean, green, carefully managed. We survived by reinventing ourselves completely. We developed fusion power in 30 years instead of a century. We built carbon sequestration systems that terraformed our own planet. We unified a species with 12,000 cultures into a single government without losing our diversity. We did all of this because the alternative was death. She turned to face Counselor Thren directly. "So when you ask what we can offer, Counselor, the answer is simple. Urgency. We can remind you what it's like to know that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. We can show you what desperate innovation looks like. We can teach you how to do in decades what you've been doing in centuries." "At what cost?" Vess asked. "Your advancement rate suggests you've taken risks that would horrify most species. How many died for your progress?" "Hundreds of thousands," Chen said without hesitation. "Maybe millions if you count indirect casualties. Every human in space knows the names of those who died testing our fusion reactors, our FTL drives, our colony systems. We don't hide our failures or pretend they didn't happen." She paused and her voice hardened. "But here's what we learned. Cautious species die too. They just die slower, wondering what they might have achieved if they'd been willing to take risks. We chose to risk everything for the chance at survival. And we're here, while 12 billion of our ancestors aren't. We live with that weight every single day." Marin's neural cluster pulsed thoughtfully. "Captain, let me ask you a question. If the Concordat accepts your proposal, what happens when our civilizations disagree on fundamental issues? When our values or interests conflict? Then we negotiate, compromise where we can, and agree to disagree where we can't," Chen said simply. "That's what equals do. They work through their differences without one side assuming they have the right to dictate terms." "And if negotiation fails?" Thren pressed. "If we find ourselves on opposite sides of a conflict?" Chen met his gaze steadily. "Then we'll be adversaries instead of partners. We'll respect Concordat territory and expect the same courtesy. We'll compete for resources and influence like any other powers in the galaxy. We'll do everything we can to avoid war, because war is wasteful and destructive and serves neither of our interests." "But," Thren prompted, "but if war comes despite our best efforts, we'll fight," Chen said flatly. "We'll fight with every weapon we have, every strategy we can devise, every resource we can marshal. Because that's what survivors do. We do whatever it takes to ensure tomorrow comes." The chamber fell silent. Vrelix watched the council members, seeing the range of reactions: fear, respect, anger, calculation. Chen had given them exactly what they needed to make an informed decision, and it was terrifying. "You speak of war very casually. Captain, observed another counselor, a Kithran whose species had joined the Concordat centuries ago. Does humanity not value peace? We value survival, Chen corrected. Peace is just the most efficient path to that goal. But we learned something important in our history, counselor. Sometimes peace isn't possible. Sometimes the universe or other civilizations or simple misfortune forces conflict upon you. When that happens, you can either be ready or be extinct. We chose ready. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many counselors as possible. But here's the thing about being ready for war. It also makes you very good at peace. We know exactly how much a conflict would cost, how many would die, how much would be destroyed. That knowledge makes us very motivated to find diplomatic solutions. We'll negotiate in good faith, honor our agreements, and work tirelessly to maintain peaceful relations. Because the alternative is too expensive, Vess said. Understanding. Because the alternative serves no one, Chen agreed. Counselors, humanity doesn't want to be your enemy. We genuinely don't. We'd much rather be your partners, learning from your experience while sharing our own perspectives. We can accomplish far more together than in competition or conflict. She paused. But we will not subordinate ourselves to anyone. We've earned our place in this galaxy through blood and sacrifice and determination. We're here to stay and we're here as equals. The only question is whether we stand together or apart. Marin's cluster pulsed with what might have been approval. Captain Chen, thank you for your candor. The council will need time to deliberate on your proposal. Are you willing to wait for our decision? Of course, counselor. Take whatever time you need. Chen smiled slightly. Though I should mention, we have 17 colony worlds that need supplies, 3 exploration missions that are overdue for resupply, and a diplomatic meeting with an independent species near the Kepler 186 system scheduled for next month. So while we're happy to wait, we won't be waiting idly. The message was clear. Humanity's expansion would continue regardless of the Concordat's decision. We understand, Marin said. Commander Vrelix will contact you when we've reached a conclusion. Chen nodded respectfully to the council, then withdrew with her guards. As the chamber doors closed behind her, the council erupted into furious debate. Vrelix watched it all, feeling like he was watching the birth of something new. Not the peaceful integration of another species into the Concordat's comfortable hierarchy. Not the isolation and eventual absorption of a resistant civilization. Something different. Something that would require the Concordat to change, to adapt, to grow beyond the patterns it had followed for millennia. The debate lasted through the night cycle and into the next day. Arguments were made, precedents cited, scenarios analyzed. Vrelix provided data when requested, but mostly he observed the council grappling with a decision that would define the next era of galactic civilization. Finally, after 18 hours of deliberation, Councillor Marin called for a vote. The question before us is simple, she said. Do we accept humanity's proposal for equal partnership, establishing formal diplomatic relations and reciprocal technology sharing? Or do we maintain our traditional integration protocols, offering humanity membership on Concordat terms? There is a third option, Thren insisted. Diplomatic relations without technology sharing. Keep them at arm's length. That is not on the table, Marin said firmly. Captain Chen made their position clear. They will accept partnership or independence, but not a half measure designed to limit their growth. Trying to impose such terms would be seen as hostile intent. So partnership or traditional integration, those are our choices, the vote was called. Vrelix watched the display as representatives entered their decisions. The chamber silent with tension. When the final count appeared, Vrelix felt his scales shift through colors he couldn't name. Partnership, 25 votes. Traditional integration, 22 votes. By the narrowest possible margin the Concordat had chosen to change. The motion passes, Marin announced. The Concordat will establish formal partnership with humanity on equal terms. Commander Vrelix, please inform Captain Chen that we accept her proposal, and arrange for diplomatic teams to begin negotiating the details. She paused, her neural cluster pulsing with an emotion Vrelix couldn't quite identify. Today the Concordat takes a step we have not taken in 12,000 years. We acknowledge another species as our equal without requiring their cultural integration first. This will be remembered for good or ill as a turning point in our history. Let us hope we have chosen wisely, Thren muttered. We have chosen bravely, Marin corrected. Whether that proves wise remains to be seen. Captain Chen received the news aboard the Resolute with her command crew assembled. When Vrelix delivered the Council's decision, she allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, Commander. Please inform the Council that humanity accepts their acceptance. We look forward to a long and productive partnership." After the communication ended, Webb let out a breath he'd been holding. "We did it. They actually said yes." "They said yes to partnership," Chen corrected. "Now comes the hard part, proving we can actually work together. Proving this wasn't a mistake on either side." She pulled up the star charts, looking at the vast expanse of unexplored space beyond Concordat and human territory. "But if we can make this work, Marcus, if we can show that young and old civilizations can stand as equals, share knowledge freely, grow together, we might actually survive long enough to see what humanity becomes," Webb finished. Chen nodded. "Get me a channel to Earth. The President needs to know we just rewrote the rules of galactic diplomacy." She looked back at the view screen, at the Concordat station gleaming in the light of 3 stars, and thought about the future they'd just created. It was uncertain, potentially dangerous, and absolutely nothing like what humanity had expected when they first reached for the stars. But it was a future where humanity stood as equals, where their voice mattered, where they had a say in their own destiny. And for a species that had nearly destroyed itself 3 centuries ago, that was everything. Epilogue. 1 year later, the Joint Research Station hung in orbit around Kepler 442, a hybrid structure combining Concordat organic architecture with human modular design. Inside, scientists from a dozen species worked side by side, sharing knowledge that both civilizations had guarded jealously for generations. Commander Vrele stood in the observation deck with Captain Chen, watching a mixed crew of humans and Concordat personnel loading supplies onto a joint exploration vessel, the first ship ever crewed by both civilizations. "Your people are adapting well," Vrelix observed. "Though I notice they've already convinced the Zeren engineers to adopt several human modifications to the propulsion system." Chen smiled. "We're good at convincing people to try new things, usually by building something that works better and letting the results speak for themselves." "Yes, I've noticed. The Council is still debating the implications of your quantum entanglement communications breakthrough. Half of them are excited about the technology. The other half are worried about what humanity might invent next. Both reactions seem reasonable," Chen said diplomatically. "For what it's worth, we're a bit worried about that ourselves. Discovery moves fast when you have thousands of scientists pursuing thousands of different paths simultaneously." They watched in companionable silence as the supply loading continued. Finally, Vrelix spoke again. "I've been reading your human histories, the ancient civilizations, the empires that rose and fell. Do you know what strikes me most about them?" "What's that?" "They all believed they would last forever. They all thought their way was the only way, their civilization the pinnacle of achievement, and they all eventually fell, usually because they couldn't adapt to changing circumstances." Chen nodded slowly. "And you're wondering if the Concordat is heading down that same path?" "The thought has occurred to me," Vrelix admitted. "We've been stable for so long, successful for so long, that we've become convinced our methods are the only viable approach to galactic civilization. Then you arrived and proved that assumption wrong in less than a century." He turned to face her directly. "Captain, I don't know if accepting your partnership proposal was wise or foolish, but I do know it was necessary. Because civilizations that can't change eventually die, and humanity forced us to change. Perhaps you've saved us from our own success." Chen was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "Or perhaps we'll both learn from each other. You teach us the patience and wisdom that comes from 12,000 years of civilization. We remind you what it's like to be young and desperate and willing to try anything. Together, maybe we'll be stronger than either of us could be alone." "A pleasant thought," Vrelix said, "though I suspect the reality will be far more chaotic." "Probably," Chen agreed cheerfully. "But humanity's gotten very good at chaos. It's practically our natural environment." They watched the joint crew finish their loading and begin pre-flight checks. In a few days, that ship would launch on its mission, exploring a region of space neither humans nor the Concordat had ever surveyed, searching for new worlds and possibly new civilizations. The future stretched out before them, uncertain and full of possibility. Dangerous, yes. Challenging, absolutely. But for the first time in millennia, the Concordat was moving forward with a partner that pushed them to be better, to think differently, to remember what they'd once been. And for humanity, it was another step in their long journey from near extinction to becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that had looked into the abyss, survived and emerged stronger. The stars waited, infinite and patient, and somewhere in that vastness the next chapter of galactic history was being written. By old hands and new, working together, the age of the Concordate's comfortable dominance was over. The age of partnership had begun, and the galaxy would never be quite the same again.